Hello, this is going to be my review of the first episode of the new Netflix series simply called Hollywood. It does exactly what it says on the tin. So this is the new Ryan Murphy series. As I notice, I've got toothpaste over my mouth. Not a good way to start. New Ryan Murphy series, and the first episode is called Hooray for Hollywood. And I think it's like a two-part pilot, because I noticed that episode 2 is called, rather originally, Hooray for Hollywood Part 2. So I'm assuming it's going to follow on. So Ryan Murphy, who quite a familiar name for TV fans, one of the big name like showrunners slash writer directors at the moment. He's been behind such hits as Glee, as American Horror Story. He was also involved in Pose, which got a lot of critical acclaim. I think it was last year. One I mean to catch up on, actually, and various other things over the years. He's had his hands in all sorts of things, and recently signed a big, like, multi-million pound deal with Netflix to produce a number of shows. He had one with them last year, I think, but I can't remember the title. So this is his latest one as part of that deal, another big high budget production. And as I said, it sort of does what it says on the title, but the particular era is like the golden age of Hollywood, so in the post World War era. And the first episode in particular follows this character, Jack Costantino, and his like ambitions to become a Hollywood actor, to break into movies, which, as people know, is a very challenging and hard thing to do, especially probably back in those days. And the show is obviously gonna, like, I think, depict that kind of struggle and some of the politics of like making your name in Hollywood. So at the start of the show, he's comes from very modest sort of background. He's recently had a stint in the army, or is a current like soldier and has been on duty. Recently come back. He has like a young family. He lives with his wife, and she is expecting their first child, so money is like of the essence. She works as a waitress, which we see at one point, but he just has this dream of becoming a Hollywood actor. That becomes his ambition, and it's set up in the first shot of the episode, the first scene, which is quite a nice way to introduce you. Just kind of one of those straight to the heart type scenes where he's sitting in the cinema and there's an ad for Hollywood and for trying to attract potential actors, and it's this classic sort of feel that we associate with like the glory days of Hollywood, where the ad is all about glamour, just selling the glamour of Hollywood. We see like them showing like the sort of people like jumping into like swimming pools and lounging about on like sunbeds and stuff, but that's the point. It's the whole glamour, the whole lifestyle, and it's selling. It's rather than saying this can be a great kind of profession, it's a real skill if you've got these qualities. It's just saying, look at all this glamour, look at this like expensive, like fun lifestyle that you can live. So immediately that kind of cuts to, I think, part of the point that the series is aiming for, is that it's trying to sell just how much about the image, how much about the glamour and almost the facade of Hollywood than it is sort of a fantasy type existence, and that in reality it's a lot harder, a lot more challenging than that. So that opening scene certainly does a good job of setting up the show, and from there we see kind of the hardships because Jack and his wife apply for a loan. I guess this isn't really spoilers, but they apply for a loan and they're turned down just because he doesn't really have a steady job. He says he aspires to be an actor, or inspires to be an actor, I should say, and that's his dream. But he's waiting to hear back from like an audition or like something he applied for. But because he has no steady income, like the bank guy says, I have to turn you down for a loan. And again, it's sort of portrayed as the bank guy being very snobby towards him and his dream as an actor. But this obviously puts a lot of pressure on to Jack to try and get some money together. But yeah, the first episode is all about him trying to make it into Hollywood, him first arriving. So the second scene we see really is him arriving at these gates because he hears about like them accepting like casting on like the Hollywood this big Hollywood lot, and it's interesting that then it's all sort of men in a way. I think it's because it's obviously a role for a man that's been cast, but I guess it's just funny. It sort of goes against like the stereotype maybe of like all these like beautiful young girls rushing to try and get the attention. Maybe that's the sort of part of the point they were going for in this, because certainly the first episode it seems like male sort of centered, and I'll talk more about that. But they're all at the gates, they're all trying to get attention, and they're all waiting to be picked. And we get this sweeping like camera sort of movement, and operatic sort of music, and we get like this kind of prestigious casting or producer who's at the gate. And again, it really hits the point home because she like randomly points to like these guys, and it's like a certain role. I can't remember. I think it might have been a war movie. Maybe part of the irony, because of course he's been at war and he doesn't get hired to try out for it. So these other guys get called in, and he's sort of left. His dreams are shattered, but then he gets a break. He gets a break through this this character called Ernie, played by Dylan McDermott, who's Ryan Murphy knows because he would have worked with him on American Horror Story. So he plays this kind of washed up guy, Ernie, at the bar, who Jack meets, and it's kind of this standard Hollywood style character, this sort of character who, as I said, is a little bit rough around the edges. He's a bit of a barfly. He's quite sleazy, well, very sleazy. He brags about the size of his penis, even though Jack doesn't actually ask, and it's quite a shocking scene in some ways. But yeah, he offers Jack an opportunity. Basically, he offers him a job at like his gas station, and he gives him this whole speech. I've got a new vision for Hollywood, and Jack gets the opportunity, and that's kind of his like opening in a way. So that's the setup. So episode 1, there's 7 episodes, at least in the first season. I'm not sure if this is going to be a mini series, so a one-off, or if it's going to be like more than one series. I guess we'll have to wait and see how it does. But in terms of what I thought of it, I thought it was pretty awful, really. Pretty terrible. Just there's multiple problems. I can go through them, but this again, I think with Ryan Murphy, you always hear it shows very hit and miss. I mean, Glee was good for a season. It was very enjoyable, but then it really started losing its way. I think after that, I've only seen one episode of American Horror Story, which was, I'd say, average really at best, but I don't know. I've heard mixed things about that. Again, it's been very popular, and obviously he's had recently more critical acclaim type shows that like Pose gets a lot of rave review. That's obviously more of a serious style drama, although it does maybe tap into some of the glam of this, some of the style. But here we go. I mean, I thought this was a very, very ropey kind of shadow sort of pilot that just wasn't subtle at all. And I'm not saying it has to be the most subtle thing in the world, but it definitely hits you over the head with what it's aiming for. So I think just with the shot, with the style, it goes for this very operatic Hollywood lush type production, which obviously is fine. Obviously that can work. I mean, you sort of see that in a show like Mad Men a little bit, but yeah, believe me, this ain't Mad Men, folks. But the problem is they just hit you over the head with that. I think the style is too in your face from the off. It very rarely settles down, doesn't really give you much of a chance to sort of breathe. And it just feels kind of show off, like flashy for the sake of it, rather than there's a real reason for it, beyond the obvious. But I think that's part of the problem is then as like a Hollywood style satire, if it's meant to be that, you're sort of assuming it maybe is on some levels. It really barely scratches the surface. It is like desperately like wafer sort of thin. And I think, as I said, they just overdo it with the style. It's very sort of like creaky and clunky. And I think that's the thing, because even if you're saying it's meant to be like this entertaining like roller coaster, very sort of like snappy and flashy, the problem is there's just nothing that interesting about any of the characters or what's going on. And if you're going to make it entertaining, then make it entertaining. Make it really sharp and funny, witty, good dialogue. But there's just none of that. There's very little to like recommend it at all. The dialogue is very cheesy and on the nose. It's very sort of preachy at times. You know, you do get like Jack's sort of speeches about trying to make it in this town. You get, as I said, he meets Ernie at the bar. That's Dylan McDermott, who, you know, I'm not sure can really carry this role. I guess he's fine. You can see why they would cast him. He does have that sort of that roguish sort of quality in a way, but maybe that's not quite the same as they're going for with this sort of character. But I think everything in this first episode is just very in your face, because his sort of sleaziness, I mean, the over the topness of the stuff with like just bragging about the size of his genitalia. And that's an example, because actually I did sort of half laugh at that. It was quite I guess it was so brash and it was quite entertaining, but at the same time it was just so over the top and just not believable. Then he would be like talking like this, or it just felt like going for a bit of shock value. But even in that scene, we see him kind of doing this kind of like creaky sort of monologue where he's just saying things like, "It's Hollywood, kid. People don't want greasy like attendants with grease under their fingers or something." This is when he's trying to promote to him this job as like basically the gas attendant. And he says, "I've got a new vision for Hollywood. It's what you fought for," because he knows that he served in the war. And it's just a good example. It's just this very stereotypical cliche sort of archetype of a character that appears in so many of these like films or TV. It's just really badly written, as I said, very shallow. And I think the trouble is, whichever way the drama wants to go, if it wants to be more smart, entertaining, more of a satire, then fine, go in that direction. But do it with some wit, do it with some originality. And there's absolutely no originality in this at all. Or obviously you can go in a darker, direction, but they clearly don't do that neither. And just scenes like this, I think part of the problem is that it touches on aspects of Hollywood, of this golden age of Hollywood, that people are kind of familiar with, and you sort of see traces of it in like the McDermott character, and you say, oh, okay, yeah, that's sort of, you can believe that went on, or there's characters like this even today, but it's very surface. It feels almost just like this like retread of a stereotype you've seen so many times. And that's the problem, whether it's believable or not. I thought a lot of the characters in this weren't believable because they were going for this very over the top, in your face sort of like story and style. But even if like this character was believable, of someone you might see in Hollywood, I think the problem is it's just so, as I said, forced fed to you, so in your face, so just thinly written. Like watching him in this pilot, you just can't see any potential for this character beyond what he is. He just seems very surface level, he is this set character, he serves his function, but that's it. You can't really see growth for him later on. And I might be wrong, if I watch more that you might see more, but just based on this episode, you just don't see any potential for this character to grow into anything. So, as I said, Jack gets this opportunity, and this is the whole thing. He's running this Ernie character is running like this sleazy operation. So he gets like these rich, fancy clients in, and they obviously do their cars, but as like a bonus to get extra like money off them, he actually has like these attractive guys, as gas attendants, and for a bit extra they actually go off and sleep with the clients, and this includes men as well. So sometimes, as we see later in the episode, you'll get a man going with a man. And at first, obviously, when he's propositioned, Jack is like, oh no way, I'm married, I'm not doing this. And then he kind of forces his hand on him, because he says, as he's walking off, he says, there's $100 in it if you do, or you just missed out on it. So because of the situation with his family needing money, he does change his mind. And this is another problem with the episode, because he meets this like older but glamorous woman, goes back to their hotel room, and this scene is a classic example of the episode just being so all over the place, because they start talking. They start like talking about the past, and she figures out that Jack wants to be a Hollywood actor because hey, she used to have those dreams as well, and she can spot it. Blah blah blah. They get to know each other, um, but again, this show isn't heavy, so they start hitting you with the themes. It's kind of this scene is like issue tastic because she mentions the fact that she was Jewish, and that's why when she tried out and tried to get a career as an actress, she got turned down because she was Jewish. Again, all like well-worn territory. People know about these things. But the problem is, it just feels so forced into the story. They have this meeting, they're going back to the hotel room to have sex, and she just raises it in the most heavy-handed sort of way, and it just feels for the sake of like pushing like buttons and stuff. Just let's bring up the Jewish issue at this time, rather than if you think about a show like Mad Men and the way that uses its period and its characters like to raise these like really dramatic, interesting like themes. The reason Mad Men works so well is because the themes are like weaved subtly into like the plot and the characters. It's not just explained to you, and it doesn't hit you over the head with this. And I mean, a lot of this is just like glamour and style anyway. So I think, yeah, it's not like that. There's a lot of like, it's not going for a lot of depth, but there are scenes like this when it does kind of go and becomes like just issue tactic. And this is a classic example with the Jewish case and her just, and then Jack is just saccharine speech about like just the glamour of the movies and the music of the movies and how he was so seduced, and they sort of connect. But this is another problem because then the brass kicks in and it suddenly becomes a more comic scene because they get down to having sex, and I think it's meant to be an ironic sort of cut because they go from having a serious conversation and then it's, well, okay, it's time to get busy essentially. And she's kind of there for him in a way, but it's just such a bad transition. It's so clunky. And the music they play, it's just so chipper, so upbeat, so it's just ironic, but in a too like over the top way. It just makes it a very cheesy and uneven scene because they've gone for this other stuff, this more serious stuff in there. But yeah, the issues are just like crowbarred in rather than subtly weaved in, and done in a way that you kind of have, you can explore them properly rather than just touching on them and then moving on. I think this is all surface. There's a lot of forced drama. So Jack goes back and he's basically kind of furious later because the whole idea is that through this he's going to get like his big opportunity in Hollywood, and the next like customer he's asked like to do this with is like it's Cole Porter essentially, and obviously he's a big name in the movies. I think that's another thing, another issue is then a lot of times you get like these references just coming thick and fast. Like you get a mention of like Billy Wilder at some point, and I think it just feels too kind of like crowbarred in, as I said, without much sort of wit or like thought put into it. But yeah, Jack is asked to go with Cole Porter, and obviously it's it's more, well, the older lady was awkward, but this is even more awkward because he's obviously straight, and he kind of refuses and storms out. And then later on we see him like going to pick up his wife or his girlfriend, whichever it is, at her place, and she's kind of flirting with like the guy she works with. So sort of more drama in a way. And then to kind of I mean, there's a scene where he dresses up as a cop, that being Jack, and he gets this uniform off his friend. I didn't really understand that. I think it's maybe because this friend works in the movies, but this is actually quite a well directed sequence. Certainly some of the direction in this is solid, at least. But he walks down the street as a cop, and it's kind of this idea where he's becoming this movie character. He's becoming a different sort of persona outside of his like real life. And he uses it because he can get into a movie theatre without having to pay if he's a cop, apparently. So they let him in for free, and he actually like catches like this male like hustler, who's like cruising for guys in the cinema, and he's like African American, so they obviously bring that up, and it's again like the Jewish woman. It's a barrier because he's of his skin color and his background. So Jack continues to play the part as a cop, and he actually arrests him and sort of takes him in. And it's only later on, when he's in the diner and his friends there, he actually reveals he's not really a cop. But he kind of plays it up quite a lot, like he puts him through his paces. And then he says he's got an opportunity for him. He hears his story and says, yeah, I can offer you an opportunity. And you can guess where this is going. He takes him to like the car place and gets him a job with Ernie. And Jack himself goes back. But this is another issue because it sort of becomes very repetitive, the plot at this point. And it might just be the sort of problems you get with pilots, where they just cram so much in, or try to, and they just try and get you into like the flow of what the show is about. But this soon gets like very repetitive, because this character, Archie, his name is, he follows like the same path as Jack earlier. So he goes to work, gets a client. It's a man, so like he obviously he's very much in his element because he's been doing this anyway. But with this, he gets more money, and like Jack, he dreams of being in the movie, so he's got that opportunity potentially. But they just have this expression which is called Dreamland. So the customers drive in and ask for Dreamland, which means, of course, sex, the experience. So, but you see this at least 2 times, maybe 3 times. So it's just one of these like little jokes, which is fine the first time, but it just gets repetitive and then going off. And it's the same pattern. As I said, Archie goes with this guy, they go back to the hotel, and they start talking about their lives. They start talking about their experiences in Hollywood. So although it's obviously different from what Jack was saying to the woman earlier, it's still the same sort of scenario. But I think what might be interesting is to see if we're gonna set up all these different characters, and you're gonna get like a bigger cast of characters if they're all gonna be trying to break into Hollywood, and you follow them along rather than it just being Jack's story. Which Jack is pretty wooden, I have to say. That's another problem. I don't think the actor's very good. I think he's very one note, and obviously the character and the writing just isn't there at this point. I think he's very unengaging. There's nothing to make you really like him. I think it is a mix of performance and the writing that just doesn't elevate him enough. And I know it is like a somber cast. There's obviously going to be like characters and actors brought in as we go along. And I think it's a pretty decent cast overall. I don't know if it's a cast that stands out as being great. I know someone who's in it is Samara Weaving, who I absolutely love, so I look forward to seeing her. She, of course, was in Ready or Not and The Babysitter, so has a bit of like a horror background, and she's a great talent. I absolutely loved her in Ready or Not. So certainly when she appears, I think that should elevate things. But yeah, the lead character of Jack, I'm just not into at the moment. But he eventually does. He gets this opportunity at the end of the episode where he actually meets a casting director. So we go back to him when he goes back with this woman, and it's again very convenient. He happens to meet a casting director. I think that's another problem with the plot, is it's just not very thought out, not very well thought out. I mean, okay, you can kind of believe that he might eventually come across someone that could open the door. I'm not saying that's unrealistic, but it's just a little bit weak, the fact that they're going with this very old narrative of these are like, this is what Hollywood's like, this is the politics and the hurdles. You have to get this sort of like accidental break. Even if it's true, I'm not even doubting it's true, but it's just very cliched. It's not very original, and it's just too convenient, the fact that he has this job and it's like, yeah, she's a casting director. So he gets his opportunity because he goes back to the gates like the next day, and she's gonna make it happen for him. So originally the producer doesn't pick him out, and he waits there because he's expecting to be caught, and he sees the casting director who gives him his opportunity. And actually the woman, the producer, I know the actress, she was in The Americans, and yeah, brilliant actress actually. That's the one playing the producer. But he's got his big break, he's got a chance, but then the twist at the end of the episode is that he gets arrested because he's obviously, prostituting himself, going to hotel rooms with these people, and he gets caught, he gets, set up, and he gets arrested, and that's the end of the episode. So they're obviously going to continue that next time. But yeah, very shallow, very dull pilot, I have to say. And yeah, didn't do much for me at all. Way too much flash, and very lazy, I have to say, this opening episode. So that's my thoughts on the first episode of Hollywood. So I wouldn't recommend it at all, but I might give one more episode a go. I might check out the second part of the pilot, see if it picks things up. But so far, it's not for me. It's not very impressive, and I don't know. I don't really see that it's going to hold that much appeal to that many people. It does feel pretty cliche. I guess it's quite an easy watch, but it's not doing anything that exciting. So there you have it. That's my thoughts on the first episode of Hollywood, as I said. And if you've seen it, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Feel free to disagree with my review, but as I said, not doing much for me. So I'll be back with more TV reviews coming up soon. I'm also going to check out a new Amazon Prime series called Upload, a sci-fi comedy. Looking forward to checking that out, so you can expect the review of that to be up soon. But as I said, I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.